On December 7th, 1946, on the 5th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, Atlanta, Georgia was devastated by a tragic fire at the Winecoff Hotel. Early that morning at around 3:15 a.m., while people were fast asleep in their beds, a fire began on the third floor of the hotel and trapped the horrified guests in the upper levels. Some would be rescued in 45 long minutes, but most would not be so fortunate. The Winecoff Hotel was constructed in 1913 in Atlanta, Georgia. At the time, it towered above the surrounding buildings, and it was the region's tallest hotel at 15 stories high. The Winecoff was advertised as being a fireproof building in magazines and newspapers, and these claims were actively endorsed by the building's management and the architects and engineers who actually created the structure. Because of this so-called fireproof designation, decisions were made to cut costs when it came to fire protection systems. The building had no fire doors, no fire detection systems, no fire suppression systems, and no fire escapes. In fact, there was only one way through the building, its central staircase. The structure was not completely devoid of fire protection systems, however. There was a 4-inch standpipe that ran the full height of the hotel with a Siamese connection at street level. On each floor, there was also a standpipe connection with a 2.5-inch hose and fire department compatibility. This standpipe was supplied by a 5,000-gallon water tank on the roof with 90 psi of standing water pressure. There was also a 2.5-gallon soda and acid fire extinguisher on each level, and it was positioned near the elevators. A watchman was also on duty and toured through the whole hotel every 2 hours. To further bolster the confidence of the hotel management of the fireproof integrity of the Winecoff Hotel, a fire had broken out in a guest room and was fully suppressed using the fire protection systems that were available in the hotel in 1942. The limited fire protection systems that existed within the hotel allowed a flawed design to reach its full catastrophic potential. The Winecoff Hotel had only one central stairwell connecting all of the floors within the building. There were no fire escapes on the outside of the building, making this the only stairwell that was an exit route for the occupants in the building and the only way into the building for the firefighters. This central stairwell behaved exactly like a chimney during the fire, as flames were drawn upward through the building. The stairwell had wooden doors that opened into the corridors of each floor. Despite being an already flammable and useless barrier to fire, many of the doors were propped open and allowed easy ventilation into the upper floors, where the flames of the fire met a flammable interior surface of the corridors. In addition to the chimney effect of the unconstricted central stairwell, the design of the room allowed the fire to readily spread into the occupied guest compartments. There was no air conditioning available at this time, so the building designers included a flip-style transom above each room's door. This could be opened and closed at the will of the occupant. At the time of the fire, occupants above the third floor were trapped by an impassable stairwell and forced back into their rooms, where they opened the windows to breathe and call for rescue. In combination with the chimney effect of the stairwell and ventilation paths to the exterior through the transoms, flames, smoke, and superheated gases were quickly drawn into the rooms of the occupants through the transoms above their doors. The Atlanta Fire Department had 4 companies within 2 blocks of the Winecoff. One station was even within view of the front entrance of the hotel. Despite this close proximity to help, the fire was able to burn for over 30 minutes from the time of its initial discovery at 3:15 hours to the time of its first alarm at 3:42 hours. This was due to the bellboy who discovered the fire being trapped on the 5th floor and the night manager making his own discovery of the fire after multiple floors were already involved. The first alarm responders arrived on scene 30 seconds after the call to several floors of the hotel heavily involved in the fire, with conditions rapidly deteriorating. Hose lines were brought into the structure through the central staircase, but offensive actions were impeded by the untenable conditions within this stairwell. Units also supplied streams of water from the street level and through the windows of building exposures adjacent to the hotel. The Atlanta Fire Department's rescue efforts were commendable, as they battled against the odds with inadequate resources to save the lives of many who would otherwise have been killed from smoke and flame or from falling to the alleys below. The tallest ladders available to the firefighters could not reach beyond the 10th floor, but they adapted and improvised by using a 12-story exposure to span ladders across the alleyways like a bridge in order to save several lives. Additionally, they attempted to save people from jumping from the upper floors by stretching out nets and catching people. However, several firefighters were killed by falling hotel guests. In all, it took over 3 hours to control this fire. In all, 119 people died and 65 people were injured in this fire. Only 120 were rescued from the Winecoff without injury. 32 deaths resulted from people jumping or falling, and could have easily been prevented had a fire escape been outside of their windows. This fire is speculated to have been started on the 3rd floor by a cigarette igniting a mattress in a guest room. It was able to easily spread from the guest compartment to the 3rd floor corridor because of the wooden guest room door and the transom above. When the fire reached the corridor, it was supplied by a readily combustible mixture of wood paneling, heavily lacquered wood trim, and thick burlap wallpaper. From there, the staircase provided a perfect avenue for the fire to spread by way of the stack effect that carried heat, smoke, and flame into the corridors of the floors above. From the 4th to the 13th floors, all of the wooden guest room doors and transoms were burned away by fire. Deaths occurred on the 14th and 15th floors because of the stack effect, bringing huge volumes of smoke and superheated gases into all of the compartments and corridors on these levels. In 1947, President Harry Truman called for a national conference on fire prevention due to the outrageous death toll hotel fires had brought our country. At this assembly, leaders across the fire industry, from fire chiefs to suppression system manufacturers, agreed on conditions that must be met in order to ensure that preventable incidents like the Winecoff Hotel fire would not occur in the future. Sprinklers, fire escapes, and fire alarms were mandated in high-rise buildings. Well-marked exits were required in high-occupancy buildings. Floor plans with marked exits were to be posted in all guest rooms. It was also determined that non-combustible fire doors are required and that they must be kept closed at all times. A system for evaluating and measuring the flammability of interior finishes and furnishings was also established. Lastly, transoms above fire doors and guest rooms were wisely prohibited. Many lessons are to be learned from the horrors of the Winecoff Hotel fire. Firstly, a fireproof building is not life-proof. This term was adopted by insurance agencies to describe a building that would not collapse after a fire on its interior. Such a claim is similar to the claims made by the manufacturers of the Titanic, who claimed that it would be an unsinkable ship. Automatic fire protection equipment is also needed in large occupied structures. A sprinkler system and a fire detection system would have suppressed the fire and allowed the fire company to respond much more effectively than the delayed alarm given by the night staff. Multiple exit routes must be available to occupants to prevent them from becoming trapped and jumping to their deaths. Lastly, inspections and enforcement of up-to-date regulations is necessary preventing buildings and municipalities from becoming a potential life threat to the occupants. The Winecoff Hotel fire is an incident that must be remembered by those in the fire service and by the designers, architects, and engineers who build high occupancy structures. Those 119 people who died in horrible ways brought us a foundation of knowledge that allows us to live, work, and play in urban settings with relative safety and peace of mind.